the bisulfite hit me and gave me chemical pneumonia. I kept
Wow.
getting worse and worse and worse. I was hospitalized, and, in the Silva method, they teach you to see guides and, these, you build this and my sister said she was gonna send her guides to heal me that night, and, a golden being actually appeared in my hospital room and told me to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep I
Wow.
was up for 7 days almost, and, of course, that'll make it crazy anyway if you're not getting sleep, and I went and called her because there was no phones in the room at that time, and I went to the phone and I said, "Shelley, don't ever send your guides to." It scared the hell out of me. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a little allergic reaction here.
No
But
problem.
in the process, what happened was she said, "Well, what did they say?" And I said, "Well, all I heard in my head, this big golden being about 8 feet tall, and I was frozen. I couldn't move. It said, 'Go to sleep.'" She said, "Why don't you go to sleep?" I said, "Well, I've tried and I just can't get sleep." She said, "Just go back in and go to sleep." Well, the next morning when they came and they drew my blood because they were gonna do a blood transfusion, my body was I couldn't talk before that. She said, "Patrick, you're speaking." I could hardly walk because my body was just breaking down all over the place.
Wow.
And I walked out there, no problem. I didn't even think about that, but when I woke up that next morning, they drew blood. They came back about 45 minutes later, they drew blood again. The doctor came in and said, "I don't know how to explain this, but you have nothing in your bloodstream. It looks like all you needed was a night's sleep."
Welcome to the True Healing Experience podcast. I am your host, Dana Herrera, and with me today is an extraordinary guest, Dr. Patrick Porter. Dr. Patrick Porter has an incredible resume and life professional experiences to share with us today. He is a neuroscientist and the creator of BrainTap, a brain fitness program and tool that I personally have been utilizing for the last 4 years. And for the last few decades, he has been working with people at the intersection of personal human transformation and science. And given that this show bridges science and soul, I can't think of anybody better to have this conversation with regarding wellness today, why so many people are doing more things and doing all the things, but still not feeling better. So, Dr. Patrick Porter, welcome. I would love if you could just share, how do we know each other?
Hey, thank you, Dana. Yeah, I think we met at a conference and then we started conversing and talking and being of like mind. And then I went down to your Costa Rica experience, which was awesome. And I know you're building some out here in the US, which is nicer, so you don't have to make that trip out of the country. But I think that, we're both trying to do the same thing a little bit differently, but I think together, we need a couple billion of us doing this to change the planet. So, I'm always encouraged when I see another really when we say light worker, we're really talking about who we are at our very core. We are light. So, and we'll probably get into that a little bit today so people understand that's not a metaphysical concept, that's a scientific fact. So, and we could talk about that. And then I'm always drawn to people who are looking outside themselves and realize that that's a real part of our evolution. Nobody gets out of here alive. So, we need to have the best experience possible.
Absolutely. Yes, we could have an amazing conversation around what we are at our
Right.
core. I just did a,
Yeah.
a little video on that not too long ago. So before we start on into those conversations, what I would love to know and for our audience to know is what was your true healing experience? What before the brain tap and everything that you're building, what took place in your life that put you on this path? Like what was the catalyst?
Yeah. Well, we really have to go way, way back in time, probably before Dana, you were born. And
Okay.
I was 12 years old, and my dad had just gotten help from the Silva method, and he learned how to stop drinking. He learned that he wasn't drinking to get drunk like everybody thought. He was drinking to relax. And he didn't know how to relax his body. So he learned meditation and he thought, hey, this is good enough for me. It's good enough for my 9 kids. I was a little resistant, but my dad changed his whole philosophy about parenting. And when we got in trouble, which I was a pretty good troublemaker, and what would happen was instead of him telling us to go to our room and think about what we did, and I now know that's probably the worst thing you can do to a kid because they didn't think before they did it. They're not going to think about it afterwards. But he would say, go over to my bookshelf, pull a book off the shelf and read it and tell me how you're going to apply that today. And you go out and play. And I kept pulling out the smallest book on his shelf, which was As a Man Thinketh. And
Mm,
I kept reading it and I kept applying it. And he said, faith without works is dead. So we put together a plan. So from 12 years on until about 25, at 25, I had an experience that is pretty unique because, I've met other people along the way, but I was hospitalized from a bisulfite poisoning. I worked at a factory that did chrome plating.
Wow.
During one of the I was fixing a metering pump, and then the electrician turned it on because there's a siren going off that the factory is being charged $140,000 a minute, that this alarm was on, and the bisulfite hit me and gave me chemical pneumonia. I kept
Wow.
getting worse and worse and worse. I was hospitalized, and, in the Silva method, they teach you to see guides and, these, you build this, and my sister said she was gonna send her guides to heal me that night. And, a golden being actually appeared in my hospital room and told me to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep I
Wow.
was up for 7 days almost, and, of course, that'll make you crazy anyway if you're not getting sleep, and I went and called her because there was no phones in the room at that time, and I went to the phone and I said, "Shelley, don't ever send your guides to." It scared the hell out of me. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a little allergic reaction here.
No
But
problem.
in the process, what happened was she said, "Well, what did they say?" And I said, "Well, all I heard in my head, this big golden being about 8 feet tall, and I was frozen. I couldn't move. It said, 'Go to sleep.'" She said, "Why don't you go to sleep?" I said, "Well, I've tried and I just can't get sleep." She said, "Just go back in and go to sleep." Well, the next morning when they came and they drew my blood because they were going to do a blood transfusion, my body was I couldn't talk before that. She said, "Patrick, you're speaking." I could hardly walk because my body was just breaking down all over the place.
Wow.
And I walked out there, no problem. I didn't even think about that, but when I woke up that next morning, they drew blood. They came back about 45 minutes later, they drew blood again. The doctor came in and said, "I don't know how to explain this, but you have nothing in your bloodstream. It looks like all you needed was a night's sleep."
Wow.
And they kept me in the hospital for almost 2 months trying to figure out how they healed me. And then they told me I was too happy. So they put me on lithium.
Okay.
And
Lovely. Yeah.
I never took the pill
Good.
because I that was when they were just starting out, but
Mhm.
I would meditate every day and I'd hold the pill in my hand. I'd say, "Whatever this pill is supposed to do for me, I want my body to do it." And I'd go to level, which is what we were taught in Silva, and, they kept telling me my lithium levels were balancing, but I didn't take their pill.
Wow.
And so they let when they let me out, I escaped Michigan and I moved to Phoenix, and I just said, "I need to learn more about this." Because before that, I was going to school for electronics. So when people
Okay.
ask, "Why did you invent something like BrainTap?" Well, my first love was electronics. I was kinda geeky, although I was an athlete, I was a geek athlete, I had back then CB radios and all those kinda things,
Mhm.
and I got a chance, a really God wink, really, because, I met up with the group that made the first it was a big giant machine called the SILS, a sensory input learning system, but it was like biofeedback, but it used light and sound and vibration. And
Incredible.
I was part of the team that created that. But my journey started because if my dad wouldn't have got help, I probably would be sitting on a bar stool, doing the same thing he did, But
Yeah.
none of our family, none of the 9 kids, because they started meditating and
Wow.
started visualizing their future.
Wow. Yes, it is such a powerful, powerful tool. Funny you say that about sitting on a bar stool. When I was young, from the age of 6 to 17, actually, my dad used to take me to bars and use me to pick up women. And
Yeah.
that was something that, I mean, I was like the best wing woman ever, to
Yeah.
be honest. But that was something that I had to heal. And he never, unfortunately, I lost him to suicide in January of 2025. And what that did was truly show me the cost of fragmentation, of never coming home to yourself, of living for the outside world, of never exploring and utilizing the tools like you're talking about meditating. It's so important and it's so huge. And I'm such an advocate. And I think Brain Tap is just it's really bridging that science and soul aspect. So let's talk a little bit about the science. So what's actually happening when somebody uses a brain tap? What's happening from a scientific level?
Okay. Well, what we noticed in the lab was when somebody meditates, we can actually measure blood flow to the frontal lobe. And most of the time when people meditate, that blood flow actually ceases or slows down to the point that their frontal lobe is no longer getting the information. And that means the blood flow is going to the amygdala. And what happens then is what the Dalai Lama calls the monkey mind. It starts
Hmm.
to take over. So what we wanted to do was when we express visual, it has flashing lights. We call it retinal flashing, but it's not really working with the way you see, but it keeps the visual cortex going, which means your whole
Hmm.
brain stays awake while you're doing this meditation. And we're providing energy to the brain because your eyes aren't just attached to the brain, your eyes are your brain. So what happens is through photobiomodulation, that light moves back into the cells of the brain. And when it finds a cell that's about to die, they call apoptosis. If that energy can get there, because at the very core of who we are is the electron transport chain. This is light. And
Yes.
so in
Eternal light code.
yeah, and so when
Mm,
you absorb that light energy, the Krebs cycle starts, and not to be a physiology course or whatever, but what happens then is vasodilation, blood flow, and circulation.
okay.
And that means that you're not only building supply lines to the brain, which means you're getting more oxygen, more nutrients to the brain, you're also building the lymphatic system. So we didn't know that in 1986 when we built the very first one. We
Sure.
just knew that when you look at a candle and you meditate to a candle, most people have done that, or they relax
Hmm.
with a bath, they put a candle on. Well, every cell of our body has a mirror neuron, and that mirror neuron's evaluating our environment and making changes. And just recently here, 14 weeks ago, probably now, MIT came out and said that our body receives light codes from our environment, from the sun, from the room, from forests, from everything we're around, and our DNA actually changes every 40 seconds. So if we're in a situation where we're challenged, it upregulates our nervous system and it upregulates our DNA and we perform at the highest level. But if we look at it as a threat, then it downregulates. So when Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, your biology actually mirrors that.
Hmm.
So we started doing that. Now, about 12 years ago, I was doing a program with autistic children, and they couldn't comprehend what we were doing, or we didn't know how to get the feedback from them that they were comprehending. They were comprehending, but we didn't know that.
Right.
And so we said, what can we do? Well, we can trigger the vagus nerve through light stimulation in the ears. And the vagus nerve, for those that don't know it, they call it the wandering nerve. It's what turns on your parasympathetic system. All healing happens in the parasympathetic state. It doesn't
Yes.
happen in the sympathetic state. You can't force your body to heal. You've got to relax into healing.
Hmm.
So what we did was we started using Noget frequencies. And those lights in the ears are not just red and blue lights. They're actually flashing to a beat frequency that changes every 2 minutes. And your body, just like if you saw the movie Rain Man, when they drop the matches on the ground, or toothpicks, I mean, and he says 1,423, and he goes, how do you know that? He said, I counted them. Well, we do that too. We can do that. Our brain is really good at filtering out things we don't need that's not
Right.
useful. So we don't do that. But that doesn't mean our brain or our subconscious doesn't do it. So what we found was we could use the Noget frequency that shuts off the sympathetic system, and we could actually measure it in the lab. So now I said, well, if it's good enough for the autistic kids, and by the way, that study we did, 90% of those kids were speaking within within 6 weeks,
Wow.
because the alpha brainwave is what controls your speech patterns. Everyone knows how
Mm,
to speak. It's like having a electronic device in your home, but it's not plugged into the wall. We needed to plug it in. Once we plugged in the alpha frequency, they started speaking. So we use lights in the ears and the eyes because we are light activated. Every cell of our body has something called a chromophore, which is a little battery that sits on the cell, and or it acts like a battery. It's biological, so it absorbs energy. When it has enough energy, it actually shares that energy. It's not like humans that hoard it and go get storage machines,
right.
or storage units and things like that. So what we do is our body fills with light. Literally, there's actually a YouTube video where Harvard took a laser and put it on one finger, and they traced that light going throughout the whole body.
It's
So
amazing.
the body is designed to absorb light codes, transmit those light codes to our body. Now, what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring energy into the brain. So Dana, imagine when you were born, you had a brain that was fully functioning, 18.1 volts, 100 million neuron connections, or more. You had this infinite possibility. You learned a language, you learned to speak, you learned to walk, you learned to be your dad's wingman. All these things. And you went from seemingly nothing, but now they know it's not nothing. They now know when the Hopi Indians said 7 generations are guiding them. MIT just came out with a study that showed 54 generations of your ancestors are interfering with your DNA, or causing interference, because the past is following you into the future.
Wow.
And
That's
that
what,
past
when they
isn't
say like
just you.
generational trauma, right? Like that's what that means
Yes,
when you're talking about
exa-
generational trauma. Yeah.
exactly. When you say you can't separate the light from the sun. You can't separate
Mhm.
away from the ocean. We can't separate ourselves from the very first person. I think
Mm.
when once they do the research, we're going to go back in time. Everything that's ever been and ever will be is inside of us as a potential or as information. So when you're born, we have to filter those things out. So most people don't realize the effect of their voice. Most people, they have a 5,000 word tape loop, and in most cases, it's negative. And I know that by the 7 million sessions people listen to on Brain Tap up to the ones that deal with negativity. Now they never tell you that, but when they're in the privacy of their own home, they pick that session or those sessions that help them clear out either past trauma, negative experiences. These are interfering with our daily life because I
Mhm.
call them the dragons of the past because we drag them on and drag them on and drag them on, and they actually start to form our identity. So we have a lot of sessions that have guided imagery, but we also have sessions that are just music only because music, they've proven that when you listen to the right type of music, you're just smarter. They call
Mhm.
it the Mozart effect.
Mhm.
So when you listen to this, I'm not talking about like Led Zeppelin or something like that. That might be good for cleaning your home, but it's not good for your brain if you're not active. So we're talking about music that balances the hemispheres, creates coherency in the brain, communication between the right and left hemisphere, and then you can start to sort things out and you actually upregulate your nervous system. We can repower the brain because as we age, when I said you start at 18.1 volts, by the time you're 21, it's about 10.1 volts. Some people it's a little higher, some people it's a little less. But if that voltage drops below 7, you're going to have dementia. That's why in our dementia study, within 6 weeks, we had 100% of the people off the dementia scale. Now, we don't have the same luck with Alzheimer's yet because we
Okay.
need to put more energy to the. We use lasers and we use light caps and light beds and all sorts of things with them because
Sure.
their body is. It's better to start now while you still have a fully functioning brain. So
Right.
we put
Like
all those
anything.
things. Yeah. So we put all those things together into an algorithm. There's beat frequencies called binaural beats.
Mhm.
And for those that don't know what binaural beats are, it's pretty popular now, but if I put a 300 hertz frequency in one of your ears, Dana, and put a 310 hertz frequency in the other, your brain would not hear 300 or 310. It would hear a phantom sound of 10 hertz. Now, what we did over the years of in the lab was we found out how quickly can we move that frequency to move the brain. And if you move it too fast, the brain goes away and says, I can't keep up with you. If you move too slow, it says, this is boring. I'm going to go do something else. So we have an algorithm, a training algorithm that trains the brain. And once the brain learns that dance, it's just like learning a line dance and you're at a wedding, you just get up and do it because you've done it so many times, that
Mhm.
repetition. So we put all this together and we made it something that can be deployed across the world. We have a technology problem in the world today because there's only 4 reasons people have a brain issue. Number one, it could be their thoughts, like we talked about. It could be a trauma. They had a brain injury, or maybe they were emotionally abused and things like that. So there's thoughts, traumas, toxins. The only way toxins get cleared out of the brain are during deep sleep. Imagine, Dana, you're with me at a medical school and we're doing this is what happened in Denmark. They were doing a sleep study and they found a part of the human anatomy that they never found in a cadaver up to that point in time. Medical science didn't talk about it. In fact, if you go to the internet today and you type in lymphatic system, it's going to stop at the neck because
Wow.
your glial lymphatic system only operates at level 4 sleep. And it's something they noticed in the lab in 2015. So now everybody's talking about it. But
Sure.
if you don't get to level 4 sleep, you don't clean the brain. So then technology is playing a big part of that. So we have to have technology hygiene, if you will.
Mhm.
Don't use technology at least an hour before bed. I'm not saying
Mhm.
don't watch television if that's what you want to do, but watch something that's pleasant and pleasing. If you're feeling too happy today, then turn on the news. You'll feel miserable in 5 minutes. But think about whatever you do for the last hour before you go to bed, you're probably going to dream about it. That's
Right.
why we have so many sleeps. That our average user uses our headset between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m.
Yep. That's when I
because
use
they
it.
want to sleep better. Yeah.
Mhm. That's when I use it. Yeah, to get into that really deep theta state. I actually use it to connect deeper with myself, and I actually have a notebook by my bed. I do the Angels All Around Us one. I love that
Yes.
one,
Yeah.
and I can go so deep that I get so many downloads from my higher self, from God, that if I don't write them down as they come to me, and they've helped me with business. It's why I created the True Healing Experience. Literally came to me in a download while I was wearing Brain Tap, listening to that song, and I was like, "Whoa." And I had to get up and I had to write it down, otherwise you'll forget it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an incredible tool, and the science behind it. I love that today's day and age, all of the woo woo stuff, right, is out
Yeah.
now has science behind it.
Well,
And
yeah.
actually, I wanted to talk to you. What I want to do too is I want to do a psilocybin journey using the brain tap
Oh,
on
yeah, we've done
myself.
that.
Have
In
okay, have
in
you?
Oh, yeah, we did a study in Dallas with,
Okay,
Dr. Rosenthal, and we took PTSD. He wanted to extend the experience of the psilocybin because, even
sure.
though it lasts about 8 hours usually or something like that, he wanted it not that experience, but what happens after the experience. How do you integrate that experience? How do you
Mm-hmm.
make it, uh,
The
like we were
effects
talking earlier.
last. Sure.
Yeah. So they identify with it and say, "Hey, I can have this kind of experience." So I'd never taken a psilocybin before we did that study. And I said, "I don't know what happens with psilocybin." I was
Yeah.
not
So we're gonna
I
see.
was
We're
not
gonna see what
for
happens.
those kind of things before that. Now I'm a big believer because we
Mm-hmm.
mapped the brains of people on a psilocybin, and we noticed their brains look just like the brains of people like these monks in high gamma meditation. So we have over 300 sessions in gamma now, and people are having a psilocybin trips without a psilocybin. But we have a lot of people using it, like with ketamine, a psilocybin,
Mm-hmm.
even Dr. Lauren Lahave, she calls herself the queen of biohacking. She actually did studies with ayahuasca, where she was measuring people's brains on ayahuasca, and the transformation in brain chemistry and neuroplasticity is off the charts, which would take maybe years of therapy or years of
More
working
than
on
that.
yourself. And that's what a psilocybin does too, by the
Yeah.
way. Once
Yep.
you have those pathways open, if you continue to use them, then they stay open because there's
Right.
something called neural pruning that's happening since the moment you were born. The reason you don't have as much voltage is you don't have as much neural pathways and you don't need as much energy. So some regions of the brain, like, do you speak two languages, Dana? Do
I
you?
speak Spanish conversationally. I would
Yeah.
love to
Okay.
speak Spanish fluently. If there's a way I could do that using the brain tap, you let me know.
Right. Listen to some of the Spanish sessions that we have
Okay.
on the app. But what happens is if you learned it early, like before you're 7 years old,
Right. Well,
that
you have a
circuit.
language acquisition device, right? Like
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that region of the brain doesn't shut down. Like our science officer, Dr. Sadral, he speaks 8 languages. And when we were in India, we were there for 3 weeks, the first time I brought him over there. By the end of the 3 weeks, he's speaking Hindi. And I said,
Wow.
"Francisco, when did you learn Hindi?" He said, "We've been here for 3 weeks." Because we don't learn languages the way people think we do. When you're
Mm,
immersed in a culture, your brain starts to adapt, and languages have certain cues. He was telling me. Well, I only learned one language, and so it's really hard for me to learn a new language because I don't even. I mean, I did take Spanish in college, but just to get my grade and get out of there. But if you use these neural pathways, you not only have neurogenesis when you start if you learned a new language, you'll create neurogenesis because your brain will say, "Hey, that's something they want to do. I'm going to
mhm.
create those neurons and create those pathways to that
It
knowledge
stays
bank."
open. It stays open. It doesn't just
Yeah.
close. It stays open.
Right.
Very fascinating. I love it. So, okay, so that's the science part of it, which
Yeah.
is really important for people to understand. Like again, this isn't just, woo-woo stuff. There it's fully science backed. And now let's talk about the soul part. And it's so funny that you said, we are all light. And that came to me in a deep meditation too. Like you are eternal light code. Literally, that's what I heard. I am eternal light code. I meditate on that. I am eternal
Right.
light code. And so I didn't ever think about it in the way that you said it, like literally, like we have the neuro mirrors and things like that. But that is ultimately what we are. In this whole experiment of us on earth, we are born. And from the moment we're born, we are taught division and separation, right? You get a name. Where are you from? Who are your parents? What's the color of your skin? What's your gender? Like the team you cheer for, the school you
Yeah.
go to, everything is here to create separation. And I feel like
Right.
our entire purpose is to remember that we are all one and we are all light, right? Infinite light in this meat suit of a body. So tell me from on that side of it, how did you, obviously you have the science as a neuroscientist
Yeah.
understanding that, but when did that switch into that really deep level soul understanding of what we are and who we are?
Well, when I first met my wife, I had a sticker on my back window that when you looked in your mirror, it says, "I am light."
Mm,
And that was back in the '80s, because after that being appeared to me, I knew that we weren't this, and I only knew Jesus. I was brought up Catholic. They were really
sure.
good at keeping me isolated.
Yes,
I
they are.
of course, I still believe in Jesus, of course, but
Same.
there's,
In
there
a different
I did.
way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize there were other masters.
Right.
That's why I go to India all the time. I mean, when in the Hindu religion, in my research, there's no religion called Hindu religion. That was made up by the British.
Oh,
Hinduism is actually the human evolution system. They believe that every person was designed to evolve, illuminate, and add value really to their community.
I
And
believe that too.
so, yeah, yeah. So our body's designed for that. Now, our body's vibrating and teeming with energy. Even though we look like this, and I
Hmm.
appear in this reality without hair, all these things. The reality is who I am. This is my avatar.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So who I am, and they've done sleep studies on this. When people die, they lose 3/4 of an ounce. What is that 3/4 of an ounce? That's the energy that you are, that never dies, that never, it basically, it's on to the next adventure,
Right. Yeah.
and,
Because energy can't be created or destroyed. Right. So
right.
it's infinite.
Right. That can't be a law of physics, and then
Hmm.
it's not for us,
Right.
you know. And the whole thing is that what happened to me and let me realize that I was light was when you start watching whatever you're watching on TV, the movies you're reading, the books you're reading, everything seems to become synchronistic.
Hmm.
It's like, wow, did did they write that because of what I just experienced today? It's
Hmm.
almost like sitting in church and the person giving the sermon is talking directly to
Talking right at
you.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, but life starts doing that.
Right.
And so and then when you get off the track, things get hard and you start to struggle, and then it's not a bad thing, it's just putting you back on the track. And I always tell people, when you think about, and I've been through the dark night of the soul, before
Sure.
I went in the hospital and things. And being an entrepreneur, you're going to go through those all the time anyway, because you start questioning things. But there's
I'm
never
learning
been
that, by the way.
right. So what I tell people is there's never been a superhero. Just go read a comic book.
Yeah.
The
It's
origin
always
story
you.
of every superhero. They have to go through the dark night of the soul. Then you get
Hmm.
a skill, ability, a resource. That's your superpower. So once you find your superpower, you've got to share it, because if you don't share it, you lose it.
Right.
So that's why, like, even in AA, when you stop drinking, you'll get somebody, you could become a sponsor just because you
Right.
give back. But I think we don't have enough giving back right now. People, it's all about me. It's the I generation.
I think there's two subsets of people, right? I think you have like the light workers and people who are like preparing for new earth and doing the things that we're doing, and then you have people who are just stuck in the negativity loop and the selfishness and all of that. So it's really interesting. And I read a quote actually this morning. I was looking up the Gospel of Thomas, and it says, and I'll try to get this basically, if you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. And if you withhold what is within you, it will destroy you. And
Right.
I feel like that's what, like, once you learn this, and that's really what happened to me on my journey, right? I went through this incredible, difficult personal and professional journey all at the same time to come and find out this is what I'm meant to bring to the world. I'm meant to bring the four dimensions of wellness to the world and help people understand that if we continue to heal people in fragments, your body one place, your mind somewhere, we're never going to be whole because we are multidimensional beings. And so the coherence aspect of that, and I know that's a very big abstract word for a lot of people, but you and I have had this conversation. I would love to talk about that. The understanding of coherence is so huge because it's essentially synchronizing into one unified waveform, all moving in the same direction so that what you want and what you are made for is becomes right, and you attract. And I think when we think one thing and we say another and we feel another, then we do another, and it's in conflict with who we are, we are never going to fully become who we're meant to become and do what we're supposed to do on this planet, because we're fighting against ourselves. We're expending energy fighting ourselves. And so I know you're coming out with a coherence, um what do you call those, lessons or
Yes. Yeah.
play, yeah,
Well,
a coherence
yeah.
lesson. I would love, yeah, what is your experience with that
Well, I think
understanding?
everything in our universe is synchronistic. So if you go on YouTube and you type in metronome synchronization, this guy starts 200 metronomes all at different times, and they all synchronize. They can do the same thing with grandfather clocks. So
Mhm,
when you meet a person for the first time, you have a field of energy. Now, NIH said this. It's not me. In 1992, they came out. If you go to their website, they actually have documentation said every human being, and now we know everything has this, but they said every human being has a field of energy that's 3 feet around them. Now they're talking about the electrical field. We have a
right,
magnetic field that's much bigger, but
mhm,
that field is where all illness starts. Because when you think a thought, they know that thought is, even though they say the issues are in the tissues, the tissues are the instrument that transmits and receives those issues. Those issues are in the field because you're electrical being. You're not a
Yep.
physical being.
Right.
So you can think of your brain and your body as a transmitter and receiver of information, but you're the one who gets to decide what's good or bad. So when we get around the right, that's why community is so important. When you get around
Right.
the right people, you start
Relationships
talking,
are frequency.
you go, hey, I really jive with that person. I really click with that person. Or or you think, I don't really like that person. I don't know why.
Hmm.
And what we find is that when you're on an uphill, when you're looking at expansion and bringing more energy and light into the world, I always think of myself and other people like acupuncture needles. And, God's using us to bring energy from the higher dimensions, our higher self, however you want to think about that. And it
Yeah.
comes through us out into the world. And so where we are, that's why when he said, even in the Bible, it says, where two or more are gathered, there I am, because there's an energy field that's created with the two of us, even now, even because MIT actually proved that our thoughts go 10,000 miles away.
Wow.
So when you have a human thought, they know it broadcast and it goes into a web that they said looks like the World Wide Web. So everything is being shared in the field. And so this field is out of synchronicity. So what we're doing at Brain Tap, and we're going to be launching it pretty quick, is we're going to be able to, around the world, people get on a Brain Tap session that's all synchronized with brain waves. Everybody's in the same brain wave, focusing on world peace, focusing on whatever we're going to do that time. And we're all going to be there. And as long as we get enough people for every 10,000 miles, we're going to start
Amazing.
changing that field. And what's cool about that is, there's been changes, leaps in consciousness before. When my dad started doing Silva, which he became an instructor of, only about 5% of the world would even listen to him. He was a crazy man
I
teaching these
believe it.
things,
Hmm.
and now I get up in front of doctors and say this. And they're all going, wow, and they know it's true because it
Hmm.
resonates with them, because those mirror neurons are not just to evaluate our current environment. We're infinite beings. We're multidimensional. We're not just, we have our thoughts, we have our emotions, we have our physical body. And like you said, if you don't work on all of those, then one gets out of alignment. In my book, the new book, the Brain Fitness Blueprint, we have the wheel of vitality, right? Because it's more for science. So you look at your life, is any of these spokes out of alignment? Because then the wheel doesn't roll right.
Right.
So when
We're
when
saying the
you think
same thing, basically, you and
yeah,
I,
yeah.
because
So
we're
when
in
you think
synchronicity.
about
Yeah.
yeah, so when you think about the people you're around, there are true energy vampires, because
100%.
when we meet, we're broadcasting infrared light. We can measure that. And during COVID, they did an experiment where they said when people look at COVID as a challenge, they actually had 200 times more light emitted from their cells than people that thought of it as a threat.
Wow.
So when I see people with masks on today, I'm going, did they not get the memo? It was
They did
made
not get
up.
the memo. Yeah.
That was just the common cold, and that's normal for us to cycle out toxins and to do this. We don't want to
Hmm.
suppress that. We want to go through that healing cycle, and it's a part of nature. Just like
Release it.
everything is cyclic, you know. In
Yes.
and they've even proven that we draw in codes from the center of the universe, and they're absorbed into our body through our mitochondria and then broadcast out to our body as codes or information sets to our body. So it puts a whole new spin on astrology, when you think about how our body reacts to it. And
Yes.
not only our sun, we call it the circadian rhythm, right? If we don't get to bed by 10 o'clock, we don't get as much melatonin. We don't get by 11, we don't clean our liver, and we could go around the clock, and our body is tuned to the light of the sun. That's why people that work night shifts get more cancers than people that
Hmm.
work day shifts. So, I mean, we're not even separated from the earth. In the reality, even though I can see you on the screen right now and you can hear me, there's a lot of stuff between us, but we don't see it because our brain filters through it. And we don't see all the molecules and teaming energy and all of this. But the reality is, if you look around the world, it's all connected.
Yep.
That's why it's so hard for people like us to see people who have greed and they just destroy the planet and they don't have any concerns. And when I can't remember the chief's name, but the Indian chief said, we are not, this earth isn't for us. We're leaving it behind for our ancestors. What are we leaving behind here? So I think we have the technology to clean things up, but right now there's no profit in it. So the big businesses there's more profit when they spray Monsanto's crap all over golf courses, and they
Hmm.
have actually proof that these golf pros and people golfing get more cancer. And
And
then
Parkinson's. I saw that
yes,
one
and
too. Parkinson's.
Parkinson's and
Yeah.
all that, and then they sign into law that they can bring over all this trash and throw it on our food and put it in our seeds. I mean, it's almost as if they want to kill us. That's the the way that it's seen.
Yeah. It's a bad business model, but it is a business model nonetheless,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so doing all of this and experiencing everything that you've experienced, what has that taught you about human nature? I mean, have you had
Like,
any like, yeah,
yeah. I think that what happens is that when there's a saying in the Catholic Church, it says, "Give me a child to their 7." The Benedictine monk said this, "Give me a child to their 7, I'll give you a Catholic for life." We don't realize that we are training our children from the moment they're born. They're absorbing, integrating, and our ancestral information's there. And I think what it says is that change is hard sometimes. But change is necessary right now. The brain we have today is not designed for the lifestyle we're living. We
right,
need to change our brain, and our brain controls everything biologically. So, and I'm not just talking about the brain between our ears. We have 40,000 neutron cells, they call them in the heart, and then we have more neuron connections in our gut than we do in
mm-hmm,
our brain. It makes
yep,
95% of our neurotransmitters. And even in Tai Chi, they talk about the dantians, and there's the three dantians. Well, we're talking about they knew this 10,000 years ago. So it's not new information. It's just
right.
nobody would listen to them, or you had to go to some secret school to learn about this. When now I think the masses, the information lid has been lifted. You can choose to watch silly sitcoms, or you can sit down and watch like the Gaia channel and
I
learn things
love
about
Gaia.
consciousness and
Yeah,
things like that. So when you think about, I think human nature is it's so easy to just be part of the flock. When you decide not to be part of the flock, they get scared, and we wanna be safe. The first thing we do when we wake up, like, "Am I safe? Am I okay? Is everything going?"
right.
And then we're
It's the
relaxed.
number one need in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Safety.
Yeah, right. So, I think a lot of people don't feel safe, especially when they're being the propaganda machines out there telling us
Right.
we should be afraid of everything. When people like
Agree.
Wim Hof, who does breathing exercises, they can inject if you don't know who Wim Hof is out there, just go on YouTube. They injected him with poison. Would kill anybody else. He just did his breathing technique and breathed it out of his body. We are so magically built.
Yes.
We
Thank
are meant
you.
we're meant not only to survive, but to
To
thrive, even in
to
the most
heal.
difficult situations. They did an experiment with mice, just to put this into perspective. They fed one group of mice the cereal from our cereal box cereal. They fed another group of mice the box. Guess which ones lived longer?
Oh my gosh, the ones that ate the box.
The ones that ate the box.
Wow.
So, when you think about, you can put a lot of junk in here, and your body will keep buffering and keep doing what it needs to, but pretty
Mhm.
soon you got to pay the piper. So you got to
Right.
take care. I always say you cannot think a bad diet. You also can't exercise a bad diet.
Right.
You've got to take care of yourself. You got to do some fasting every once in a while, because that's the way we were. And the
Mhm.
best diet, when I'm asked, is just change the diet up. Don't stay on the same diet for 3 months. And every 3 months or 4 months, change your diet. It's going to change the way your body, because that's the way we lived. When we were hunters and gatherers, we didn't
Sure.
get we didn't get fruit all year round. We didn't get
Mhm.
certain
Seasonal.
vegetables all
Everything was
year round. Yeah.
seasonal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so think about that, and we're so comfortable. We go to an air-conditioned home, we go to an air-conditioned car, we complain if it's too hot, and then,
We have
we you
5,000 water faucets in
yeah,
our house. Like,
right.
yeah.
Right. So you can do things like I do. You jump into a cold plunge. You
Mhm.
you you jump in your sauna. You do things that get your cells, because your cells are breathing too. It's not
Right.
just your lungs. They're respirating. And if everything's respirating, then it's like those metronomes I was talking about, the body begins to synchronize. Your brain
Right.
begins to become coherent. You begin to have clear thinking. You begin to see the thoughts, the actions, and you start to see life as a challenge instead of a threat. And I
Mhm.
think that too many times people are looking out. They're not looking for how to think. They're looking at what to think. So many people, especially with social media, what do I think today? Let me see what Sally's doing. Let me see
Yep.
what Bob's doing. And they're not looking at their own life as your life is your lesson. And if you don't look at your life and handle those lessons, yeah, you can
They're
do
gonna
it
keep
again.
repeat well, they're gonna keep repeating, and then you're gonna come
Yes.
back and you're gonna repeat them again, you know? Like,
Right.
it's like a never ending loop. And that's one of the things I talk about too, and I've come to understand just in my own experience as well, is that the majority of us are living the survival version of us. And that survival version of us was built up into the age, like you said, of 7, right? And
Yeah,
until you move out of that survival version of you, you're going to continue, just to your point, repeating the same patterns, doing the same thing over and over again. So the ability to think about your own thinking, neuroscientists say, and which you are, is one of the highest forms of intelligence, right?
right.
And so that's why I think it's so important people understand, yes, obviously you need to do whatever you need to do to be physically healthy, but just adding inputs alone is not going to do it, because you have thoughts and your emotions and your soul. All of those things collide and work together like instruments in an orchestra, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's right.
until all four of them are aligned, you're going to continue to feel out of alignment, which will continue to keep you from doing what you're born to do, is how I believe.
Yeah, and I think too, most people look in the wrong places. They think that they're going to a health practitioner when they go to their doctor.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
sick
yes.
care. And there's healthcare practitioners. So what I always tell people is I love our sick care industry. If I break my leg or need a surgery, I want that. But
Right?
I'm not going to go to them for help. The average doctor only lives to 56 years old. Obviously, they're not doing something right,
Right.
and you're not going to solve this problem with a pill. You can't, they're trying to solve problems that are emotional problems or spiritual problems or
Mhm.
physiological problems with a pill. That's never going to happen because we're not just biological.
Right.
You know, our biological system takes its direction from our psychological system, if you will, and all these energy systems that we have. It's
Mhm.
all in one. So we need to look for a healthcare practitioner who's going to keep us well. Maybe, if we need somebody, or read the right books. And you mentioned this in your book too, in a little bit different way. But you need to look at who is actually teaching you, because we all need teachers, and it can come in the form of books, seminars, YouTube's, podcast, all these things. But in this day and age, we can have the best of the best, or we can listen to the worst of the worst.
So, well,
And
that's why you need discernment, right? That's why for me,
yeah,
like, still the number one best tool out there is your own awareness, is your
yeah,
own awareness. And what Brain Tap helps you do is actually tap into that awareness, because there's so much noise and we're in alpha for so long, and it's so many of us. I think Rudy, one of my energy coaches and who wrote the forward, said that only 2% of people actually sit in stillness every day.
right,
2% of people. So you're not even paying attention to it. So your awareness is the ultimate tool, health tool, I believe. And then you
right.
can determine who should you talk to, what should you use, and all of those other things, right?
Right. I mean, I had a client come in. This was back when I had my clinic open to the public, and we always asked the question, "Are you on any prescription medicine?" Because we wanted to make sure we weren't doing something that was contraindicated. And then we said, "How would you rate your health?" She was on 17 prescriptions, and she said she was in excellent health. And I said, I'm
Lack
a
of
little
awareness.
confused. We called it the Columbo close. There used to be a detective on TV called Columbo. I'd say, "You just act a little confused." I go, I'm confused here. It says you're on 17 medications, but you say you're in excellent health." She goes, "Yeah, because I'm on those prescriptions." I
Mm,
said, "Do you understand what those prescriptions are doing? Most of them are only valid for 14 days, validated. They didn't even test the long term, and they're interacting." I said, "That's like putting a black tape over your engine light and saying, 'I just fixed my engine.'"
right.
You know, you need to find out what the cause is, and usually the cause is something to do with the way you're thinking. You know,
That
you're
started way, way back when,
yes,
right? Like way,
and
like you don't even know where it started, right?
right.
Yeah.
It could be a pattern from your ancestors,
That too.
that shows up in your DNA now.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're married, you know that sometimes you say you're acting like your mother, you're acting like your father, because even though we swore we were never going to do that growing up, it shows up because we see that and we mirror them, right? Even though,
Right.
so the people you hang out with, the books you read, the seminars you attend, the classes, all this information is super important. And then what most people don't realize is it all gets consolidated when you sleep. So if you're not sleeping well, that's when that REM sleep is so important, that 2 hours of REM sleep that you should be getting, and 1 hour
To
of
my
deep sleep to
or
detox the brain.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as you do this, what happens is your brain begins to consolidate and look for more opportunities for what you're putting your energy on. So you put your energy on health, wellness, and gratitude, you're gonna have more of that in your life.
Right. So if okay, so as we close here, one thing, somebody listening and just like I don't even know where to start. Like what's something simple you believe in all your years of doing this is where somebody could start.
Start your day off right, which means drink a large glass of water with salt in it, because your cells You just slept all night long. You're a little dehydrated. Your brain needs that cellular activity. Think of every cell like a battery. Forego your coffee for at least 2 hours so you don't crush the cortisol curve. Start building up your energy from the morning on. You'll sleep better at night when you start doing that.
And can I add to that? I love
Yeah,
that. Can I add to that? Do
yeah,
not pick up your phone. Do not
yes,
let
yeah,
the first thing you put in your mind be an email or social media or a text message or a WhatsApp. Spend the first 20 minutes getting up, drinking a glass of water with salt. I'll start doing that tomorrow, actually. Put your feet in the grass and
get the
set your
sunshine as
intention
soon
for
as
the day.
possible, yeah. Get
Yeah,
the
sunshine.
sunshine because that's gonna reset your circadian rhythm or do your brain tap if you
Hmm.
have one, because that we need to reset. Most people don't know how to wake up. They're so nervous, they're so anxious, they're so worried. We should wake up a little anxious and a little nervous because it's part of our DNA. We were part of the food chain not too long ago.
Oh,
So
interesting.
so
Okay, yeah. So it's
so
okay if you wake up a little
yeah.
nervous. Good to know.
Use that. That's why exercise in the morning is almost 3 times more effective than working out in the
Yeah.
evening.
You
So
move the
to
energy, right?
yes, move the energy, get your brain balanced, and you start creating that BDNF, that miracle growth for the brain, and just start your day off right.
Man, I love it. I love it. Every single person on the planet needs to listen to this. That's all I
Yeah,
need to say. That's all I'm going to
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Anything else that you would like to add?
I think the main thing is that don't believe what other people have told you about yourself. You are far greater than other people have told you about. They don't even know who they are. How can they tell you who you are? The only way you're going to do that is just what you said when it said, be still and know God. And you have that God force. Remember, you can't take the light from the sun, the wave
That's
from
right.
the ocean. You came from source. So if you allow source in, your mind will open up, your brain will open up, your life will open up, and you'll have the glory that is part of this experience. And you won't have all the stress. I mean, you'll still have stress, but you'll recover from it faster because we live in a stress environment, unfortunately, from the,
Your
the
your
air we breathe.
resilience will build,
Yeah.
right? The resilience
Yes.
of
Mm.
yeah will build. Yeah, I agree. Beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. In the book I talk about that. Imagine, this God is the sun and we are the rays of sun. We're not separate from the sun. It still holds all that the sun does. It's just not the sun itself. And I
Right.
love that analogy that we are the rays of sun and God is the sun. And
Hmm.
so with that, I encourage every person to remember who the fuck you are. Because ultimately that's what it's about. And there are tools and books and resources for you to start doing that. And I couldn't, again, be more honored to have you today, Dr. Porter. Thank you so much for this just incredible, enlightening, scientific soul conversation. I appreciate you. And until next time, the True Healing Experience, where science meets soul.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the True Healing Experience. You can find the 4 Dimensions of Wellness book by Dana Herrera and the 4 Dimensions of Wellness assessment on theco.life. That's THECO.LIFE. We'll see you next time, where science meets soul.